to the Piedmont Triad Podcast.
Before I get too old, I'm gonna head down to Muscle Shoals. Baby, you can meet me at the station.
Welcome to another episode of the Piedmont Triad Podcast, where we explore the weird, artistic, and unusual aspects of the Piedmont Triad area of North Carolina. I'm your host, David Locklear, and today we are talking with author, business owner, and life and business entrepreneur coach, Tamika Wells. Tamika owns and operates several local businesses, including Honeybee Delivery, a local shopping service, the Elevate Her coaching system that provides support and feedback for female entrepreneurs and life coaching assistants. She also recently achieved the title of poet with her new book of poetry titled Into the Soul of a Woman. Tamika talks to us today about different life coach techniques to cope with stress, the way our body physically manifests trauma over the years, and how she found healing after reconnecting with her adult son when they had no communication for almost a year.
It's like just being patient with people is like one of the biggest lessons of the pandemic right now is being patient with people, looking at behaviors instead of words that they say, and just realizing like surrender. We're not in control. It'll happen when it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the idea that, you know, the things you can control, it's like, okay, you know, execute control over those things, but the things you can't control, there's no need to get high blood pressure over it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people could, you know, learn from that lesson. It's something that, I mean, it's taken me a long time to learn patience, and honestly, I think having kids was really the big one for me, you know, teaching you, you know, it's like, where do you put your energy in terms of how I feel about things? It's like, I could be mad about this, or I could just be like, well, it's just the way life is, and I can let go and put my energy into something that really matters.
For sure. Yeah, that parenting has definitely molded and chiseled and sanded me real good. And he's 22, and I'm still being molded and chiseled, and still painful.
Well, you know, it sounds like you probably have a pretty good relationship with him, and you know that having that as a basis is always going to make life so much smoother, because I feel like that actually encourages healthy communication when you've got a decent relationship with not only your kids, but just, you know, anybody around you, you know, and I kind of feel like that's sort of what you touch on as a life coach. Is that an appropriate title for you?
Sure. Yeah. Relationships are vital, like so important. And I'll be honest, you know, one of the struggles with publishing this book was when I started the journey back in June last year to really like focus in on publishing it. My son and I hadn't spoke for about a year.
Oh, no kidding.
And yeah, and it was like, well, how could you talk about being a parent and helping others, and your relationship with your child sucks? Like, nobody wants to be around you, you know, that you love and you've invested all this time and energy into. So how dare, you know, it's imposter syndrome. So since then, he's come around some more, and he's, you know, like I talked to him for Mother's Day, and we were sitting out that night at the art walk, and he reached out on Instagram, but I did miss his call because I don't have my notifications on for that. So he was trying to connect, but he doesn't understand, like you and I do, that life is so short. You only get one parent, and you need to communicate. How I've made peace with that, because in some of those poems, I kind of say like, well, that's why he hates me, or, you know, you live in regret. Humans, we naturally, when we don't know the answer to something, we come up with a story to soothe or to answer the whys or the question marks. So for a while, from 2019 when he moved out into college and his own journey, to probably about the process of writing his book. It was like, oh, well, I did this wrong and I regret this and I should have did this and if I had done that. And a friend of mine told me last year in June, is like, you have to go forward with your story and just be honest and say, look, I don't have it all together. We don't have the perfect relationship currently, but then there will be parents that will attach to that and say, me too. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, in all honesty, we're still finding our way together, and it hurts like hell, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It's a painful cross to bear while trying to help others with their relationships, when you got this nagging thought in the back of your mind that you did something wrong as a parent, as we all do, when honestly I've done the very, very, very best I can and beyond, and he knows that. And I just come to a piece where he's just trying to find himself, and he doesn't want help. He wants to take the tools that were invested in him and make the best of it, and that's what he's doing. Mm-hmm. You know, and boys of that age, he's 22, they're still learning how to communicate and keep in touch, but they want to do it on their own. So it's hard, but my perspective has shifted that I haven't done something wrong. Actually, I've done something right. It's just not looking the way that everybody else's story is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And you know, coming from the perspective, having been a former 22-year-old male, I remember taking my parents for granted for a while, actually. I remember it was like, if I saw my phone ring and it was my mom or dad, I was kind of like, oh, well, you know, it's cool. I'll call them back later. And, you know, I didn't find out until maybe a few months later that it really upset my mom that I was not answering the phone. And I had no idea what kind of impact that was having on her. And I felt really, really bad because I was just... Yeah, I was trying to be like, you know, my own person, figure all this shit out on my own. I've got it, you know, and yeah, and I think at that age you just don't recognize some of the hurt you can cause other people, and honest to God, I hope that doesn't happen with me and my girls. I hope that they'll always answer my phone, and that I will never have to be subjected to the pain I've subjected my poor mother to, you know.
Right, yeah. Yeah, well, they're girls, so there's some hope.
Right.
But we don't want to be, like, you know, sexist or anything like that, because I did that to my mom, too, but me and my mom weren't that tight, you know, but I just kind of tried to find my own way, too, so I totally get it. And if I didn't have my son in my 20s, I probably really wouldn't have communicated with my family like I should have, so... But with a child, you're like, oh, I need help. I actually do need you guys. So it was different. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's still times where I find myself in situations and I'm literally thinking, okay, I got to call my dad. I got to call my mom. You know, they could maybe help me out with this, you know, and I've come to appreciate them a lot more in my middle age than I did in my early 20s, but I think that's just part of the process, you know. It's like everybody has weird ways that they process things, and and I feel like that's sort of what you kind of help people do who are at a loss.
Right, yeah, for sure. And just like, again, with the story we tell ourselves, and you could get caught up in a negative story about, you know, well, why isn't he calling me? It's because I said this, or I posted this on Facebook or Instagram, and he thought that, or it's something I did in his childhood, or the bad relationship I had while he was in the home, or and then the truth of the matter really is, no, that's not the case. And it's coming from my childhood of having an anxious attachments, because, you know, I didn't have stable home environment, so I have an anxious attachment style where I like to be in connection, and I like to know what's going on, it tends to be, you know, moms and parents. Even in my personal relationships, like, I like communication. And so, whereas he might be avoidant, where he's like, Mom has filled me up enough, I'm good, I'm going off and doing my thing, and she should understand. And so I have to work through my stuff and say, okay, this is from my childhood. And so I do EFT, emotional freedom techniques, and tapping and working on my childhood stuff so that it doesn't create those negative stories and then perpetuate that cycle in my current relationships. And that's what I like to help people, like, part of that business is called Honey Tree Healers, helping you get to the root of things. So I feel like in talk therapy, as much as I love your wife and, and therapists are important, and I have a therapist, I also add on to that, tapping and digging into some of the deeper things and incidences in my life or traumas or triggers that would make me feel abandoned or make me feel like I've done something wrong when really that person's just living their life and that's what they're supposed to do. And so I try to help people work through that so that they don't continue to maybe attach to an abusive person, a person that likes to be up under them, or a toxic situation where a person likes to be up under them but for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So it's meeting that childhood need, but it's not in a healthy way.
Yeah, like sort of the idea that there's somebody to take care of you, but if the person that's taking care of you is beating you with a cane, that's not a good idea, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because people will, because of their childhood situations, will attract bosses like that. They'll attract friends like that. They'll attract, the word narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder is very popular now. So they'll be in, narcissistic or abusive relationships with their partner because it meets that childhood need of that connection, but it's hurting them. But it's acceptable because it's still meeting that need. They're still reaching out to me, even if it's because they want something from me.
Yeah.
Or they're controlling me, but at least they're checking on me,
So it's sort of, in your perspective, is it sort of like a devil type of a situation?
Yeah, sleeping with the enemy. I talk about this in one of the poems, Moving in Silence, and I talk about I was never one to keep my friends closer. Well, keep my friends closer and my enemies closer because it takes too much energy. But we still tend to do that in relationships. I'd rather be with someone and know that they don't have my best interest completely than to go out there and be alone and then there's someone out there worse. They even do that in society. We're not going to get rid of this dictator in this small country because the person that's going to take over is going to be worse. So we'll let this dictator stay in that, position and cause all this trouble. Because if not, history has said if we pull this dictator out, there's going to be a vacuum and someone even worse is going to step in his place. Whether that's true or not, I don't study history like that, but we tend to do that in relationships too. Like, mom and dad are going to stay together for the kids because if, you break up or you divorce, then the step parents are going to be worse. And that may or may not be true.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is kind of funny how in those types of situations, when, you find yourself sort of stuck, it's weird when you realize that you're stuck. I think everybody's kind of been in a situation like that before where it's like you're capable of telling yourself all the sort of white little lies that are needed in order to function day to day. And then it just kind of eventually, like the house of cards falls apart, and now you're sort of left and exposed to the reality of it, and what do you do? And I feel like so many people simply say, like what you just said, is that, well, I don't want something worse to happen, which is, it's such a depressingly, like, narcissistic view, instead of, if I change this, maybe something better will happen. It's hard to believe that, and it confuses me, I think, as it does a lot of people, why we can't get into that mentality. And is that your experience with working with people, that they tend towards the negative instead of the positive?
Yeah, until we work and we go through, like, we visit childhood situations, and then they come out of it seeing it differently. One thing we do is called Hacking Reality, or I like to call it New Stories. And so usually that emotion of there's nothing else better out there is from a childhood memory of some sort, or 10 or 20 years ago, 5 years ago, something traumatic. Could have been a car accident. It could have been parents divorcing and you're an adult, and it's like your whole idea of life was a deception, a big deception, because adult children tend to take it harder than, younger children. And so we'll go back to that memory where that person froze. And that's sometimes like you can see somebody that's in their 50s and they're still acting like they're 8 years old, is because there's an incident that happened when they were 8 and they're stuck. They're frozen in that. And anytime something triggers them, they go right back to being 8 years old and acting like an 8-year-old instead of a 50-year-old. Mm-hmm. And so we go back to that memory, and we take the negative charge or the story that they told themselves to cope with it, which is usually a child blaming themselves. Like, my parents are fighting because I got bad grades. My parents are arguing or breaking up because I got in a fight at school, or I didn't clean my room. And that's not the truth, but that's what kids do. Mm-hmm. And so we go back to that childhood situation, and or especially, to be honest, with sexual and emotional trauma, and that child might say, well, this happened, this person did this to me because I'm dirty, or because I'm ugly, or I'm fat, mm-hmm. And we go back and we can't change the trauma of the situation, but we do change the belief around it and get the truth around it, that person had a problem. It wasn't the child's fault, and taking that shame off of them so they stop attracting that type of predatory relationship in their adulthood. Mm-hmm. And so then they see it positively. We can even change the scenario because the memory is moldable. You can change the memories and how you think and see things, the story you tell yourself about it, and then that's what brings a positive outcome in the present, in our future. Mm-hmm. So that person, when we come back out of a session, that person will see that situation in themselves a whole lot differently. And then they have a more positive outcome. So when you say, well, if you make these changes in the current situation, the current relationship, you'll probably have a better outcome. And they were like, you know what, I will, because I'm not dirty, I'm not broken, or it wasn't my fault when my parents split up,
Yeah. And is that... So to go back to what you were talking about earlier, you were explaining, you were talking about tapping, the somatic tapping. Can you explain what that is, and is that something that you use in these types of traumatic situations with people?
Yes, absolutely. Me being a sexual abuse survivor myself, and being in and out of therapy since I was 9, I've had struggle with childhood depression and wanted to commit suicide at 9, 10 years old because of all those traumas that were suppressed. And then it would pop up every now and then when I'm 17, and then it popped up again when I was pregnant at 19, and I'm depressed. And even as being in a pandemic in 2021, when your wife and I became good friends, I had to sign up for therapy then. I was depressed, just being stuck and then all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And so, that anger and that frustration, not being able to get it out of my system in a healthy way, it imploded on the inside. So I signed up for a therapist then, and been with that same therapist ever since. So I say all that to say, tapping has helped me, honestly, faster, because when I was looking for a therapist, they're like, oh, well, if you have trauma, you have to have a special kind of therapist, because basically the wrong person can break you or make it worse, in so many words. Mm-hmm. And when you do talk therapy, it doesn't incorporate your body. Tapping and EFT, your body has meridian points in it, like in acupressure, mm-hmm. that when you tap on those meridian points in your body, it moves energy around, it brings things up out of the subconscious, and that's how we draw up those memories and those emotions that are triggering those fight, flight, and freeze tendencies that we experience in our adulthood. And the wonderful thing about tapping and being able to incorporate your body is designed to heal itself. And that's a component that is missing from the study of psychology in general, if that makes sense.
Okay, so is it like, so it's a physical interaction, like literal tapping on your body, kind of like acupuncture with needles?
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. So you're tapping on the top of your head. You're tapping at the beginning of where your eyebrows are. Those are different tapping points. And they have lines that flow through your body to different important organs like your liver and so on. So you're stimulating your body and you're generating energy in your body, and your body is healing itself as we talk out loud and talk through some of the emotions and the feelings that that person might have. And we could do that on Zoom. It's like, you're mirroring each other on a video call, or it can be in person. Mm-hmm. Tapping has even been done over the phone, and you're just saying, okay, tap on your eyebrow now, tap on your side of your eye, underneath your eye, and you're talking about the sadness or the pain or the fear, and working through the negative and bringing it to a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm. Is there evidence that you can refer back to that explains why this is a positive thing on your overall, like, mental and physical well-being?
Oh, yes. There's a book by Peter Stapleton, mm-hmm. P-E-T-A Stapleton, and she talks about it's the book called The Science Behind Tapping.
And what do they talk about in there? What is the science? I mean, if you have it fresh on the top of your head, I don't know how recently you read this book, so I might be asking for a review for something you've read 5 years ago, and I don't want to put you on the spot if I am.
No worries at all. Tapping, she talks about how it deals with unresolved issues. It transforms your beliefs, and it reprograms you to have happiness and success. You can use tapping to heal food cravings, anxiety, depression, weight issues, trauma. It has been a Harvard study they did that tapping reduces the amount of therapy you need by 10 years. So sometimes people we can't guarantee, in a session or two, a major trauma will be healed. But we have practitioners, tapping or EFT practitioners that have been in talk therapy for 20 plus years who decided, tap therapy or EFT it kind of circumvents because you incorporate the body. And there's also the book, The Body Keeps Score. But it's a very popular book, The Body Keeps Score. And it talks about how when we do experience trauma, it's not just in our mind or our emotions, it's in our body. His name is Bessel van der Kolk. Mm-hmm. And that book was published in 2015. And so it talks about how when we incorporate the body, the body will experience the trauma and memorize it and keep it in certain parts of our body. Mm-hmm. And when you have that trauma or you have a trigger, sometimes we feel it. We'll feel it in our stomach. We'll feel it in our knee. You might get a headache. That's the body bringing up that memory or that trauma. So tapping, you can actually, especially when you have pain, we can pinpoint exactly where you feeling that pain. So if it's a stomach thing or something in your leg or your foot, you can actually tap and move that sometimes the pain will move around, and we can actually kind of like pinpoint it and bring that pain down. And then what it does is when that person leaves that session, they have tools that when they're not in a session with a practitioner, they can still practice. So if they wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety or knee pain or neck pain, they can do the tapping and bring that pain level down themselves.
Okay. Sort of like an at-home remedy, so to speak.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Okay. So and don't take this in the wrong way. I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on this, just because I think Jenny would kind of expect me to do this, honestly. But
Yay, good.
So I'm the type, and I think a lot of guys are like this. I tend to approach holistic medicine and, like crystal therapy and stuff like that. I tend to look at that with a much more skeptical eye, and I think that, and I'm making a generalization, I completely understand that, but it's like I almost feel like that generalization towards men, we tend to be more skeptical of those kinds of things, and I feel like women tend to be more open to those types of concepts. So do you think that there is maybe a psychosomatic angle to this that is maybe helping people in ways that is like all in their mind, or do you believe it really is sort of like the energy of what you guys are doing that is like healing like almost generational trauma on some level?
Oh yeah, for sure. My teacher tells a story about a man who came into his office and he was about at the end of his marriage. He was at the wit's end and his wife was accusing him of constantly cheating. She found phone numbers in his phone and he was, cheating or talking to other women. So he came to the therapy session he called himself a sex addict. Well, come to find out, he was talking to or dealing with these other women, but he had erectile dysfunction. He couldn't get it up, so he wasn't having sex with them. So why is he doing this behavior of making his wife feel like he's cheating when he's not actually getting the gratification? What's going on? And through tapping, a memory came up from tapping on those different meridian points in his body. A memory came up that his stepmother would harass him growing up. So he would be, let's say, in the shower, or he would be, getting dressed in his room, and she'd fling open the door and go, "I caught you. You were looking at me. I saw you, doing something crazy, like to harass or torment him." And it was almost like he got into this freeze state of mind. So his body got used to being accused. So it's like it created a dopamine, which is crazy, but that's what traumas tend to do. So as an adult now, the feeling of, aha, I've caught you, is what he kept trying to reenact or recreate in his marriage. So he would have this little secret. He's got these women he's talking to, and then his wife finds out on his phone, and he's like, he got that same dopamine feeling, aha, I've been caught. And it was like, it was crazy, because no one would put two and two together. And in a tapping session I had, and once that memory was changed and dealt with the issue with his stepmom in the past, that childhood trauma, he no longer had that habit anymore.
Wow.
So it was just like sometimes these things get stored so deep down our subconscious, we have no idea why they're still acting out in our adulthood. In a personal experience with a client I had, another male, he's from France. He lives out in California now. He's a phenomenal celebrity chef. Mm-hmm. And he had an issue of, again, like we talked about, I might lose this person, or I might lose this relationship if I do X, Y, and Z. And so he had an anxious attachment with his current relationship. Come to find out, his ex-wife committed suicide, and he found her hanging over 20 years ago. Oh. So that was something that he had to work through. So he didn't realize, he said, I've already tapped on this. I've already worked through this. I don't know why this keeps coming up and why I feel like I'm going to lose my current girlfriend. Well, a memory came up while we were tapping on the body. He was about 8 or 9 years old, and he and his friends used to make fun of this dog. This is back in France. That was caged up, and the owner was very neglectful of the dog, and the kids would come to the cage and kind of like poke fun at the dog and make fun of the dog. And one day they went out there, and the dog had hung himself. Like his chain, he went to jump out of the fence, and the dog, got caught up on a chain and was hanging. And so the children, of course, say that that's my fault. The truth is, the adult that's in the session with me realizes that the owner was neglectful. The dog was probably desperate to try to get out or get water or whatever, and it was an accident. But his younger self said that was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't even see the correlation between the dog and his wife and how it reenacted into his current situation and his fear of losing his relationship with his current girlfriend. But through the session, he learned none of those things, not even his wife. He did all he could do to do intervention. Their children tried to get her through her depression. It was her choice. It wasn't his fault. But taking the charge from what happened when he was 8 to what happened when he was in his 30s to what happened, he was able to take control of that situation and reframe it. And now he has a flourishing relationship with his current girlfriend, and they're doing great things in business together, where he had that wall up because he was afraid, if I build a business with her, I build a life with her, I'm going to lose her, when all those things that happened weren't his fault. So that's a testament of tapping.
Okay. No, I mean, that's good, because I'm not a big fan of the idea that, one thing fits all. One fix is going to fix for everybody. So I'm glad to hear that this is a positive thing for people, because I do think you're onto something there, that there are a lot of people that don't recognize some of the things that are affecting them from their past. It's like I still discover things every couple of years, it seems like, where I'm going, oh, yeah, this happened to me. That's why I'm being a dick about this. That makes sense.
Me too. It's like, why did I react that way?
Yeah, it's always me being an asshole to somebody, I'm always like, why was I doing that? That was so shitty. What is wrong with me?
Yeah, I'm like, just give me a minute. I got to process this, even if I come back to you 2 days, because the way I'm about to say this, the way that I should, and I don't know if it's loaded from something from the past or not, so just get out the way. I don't want to play target practice with you.
Right.
And sometimes it's just like, blah, 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 oops.
Oh, yeah. Or you have to walk away and you're just like, okay, so anyway, that was my fault. I apologize.
And I'm like, oh, let me sign up for another tapping session because I got some more stuff to work through.
It's so true.
For sure. And it's just like we're always growing, and it's nice to know that you have these resources that, you can work through them instead of being stuck like that. Some people are like, that's just my personality. That's just the way I am. Like, no, you're mean as hell. You need help.
I know. Yeah, so many people that it's hard for them to recognize, because I think the strength comes in the idea that you've got to sort of recognize on some level that what you're doing might be stupid, and that you should change yourself. And that is one of the hardest things in the world to admit to yourself, let alone anybody else, is that you may be screwed up and did something wrong, and now you've got to fix it, because no one wants to admit that. That sucks. That's a terrible feeling,
Yeah, definitely. It's like, wait, so the whole way I've been living, I've been deceiving myself? It's been me? Really?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I am the common denominator in these relationships, so,
Yeah, that's never a good, when you can even prove it with math that you're being a jerk in certain situations.
Yeah, but it's like, it's cool to be self-aware. Like, look, if you put me in this situation, you're not going to like. I tell people, like, my boundaries are for your safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to go on the other side of these boundaries for too long, trust me.
Yeah. This is for your good.
This is for your good.
I'm not a nice person. You should step backwards.
Like, I tell people, they're like, I don't know why Will Smith waited so long to get up there and slap Chris Rock. And I say, well, my son has a longer fuse than I do. And I know for me, I would have had to sit, think about it, contemplate, and be like, oh, hell no. And then get up. So I may not be quick draw McGraw like some of y'all, but when I do, and then he's even, longer fuse than that, so it'd have been a couple days before he responded. So
I know that self-analysis stuff, man. It's very time consuming. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that either.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even with the Chris
though.
Rock thing that you're talking about, I mean, I remember watching that and thinking, okay, would I have snapped that hard, or is this like something that's just building in that poor guy?
Yeah, and I'm the person that's like, what's the why? What's the why? What was behind it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've done that where I've been, just out, say, drinking, having a good time, whatever, and then something happens that makes me feel a little irritable. And when, I was in my early 20s, of course, I would just go off on it and ruin relationships, whatever. And now it's like, I feel that thought, and then I go, you're not exactly in your accurate state of mind. Maybe keep your mouth shut right now, because that might be incorrect, It's like I'm almost looking at it scientifically now. I'm going, this feels off. Maybe I should keep my stupid mouth shut.
Yeah. Like, let me get up. I'll come back to you for a minute. Woosah. Woosah.
If I'm still bothered in a week, I will explain it to you in a much calmer and sober fashion.
I've done some meditation. I've done some prayers. I've burned some incense. I've done some tapping. You're just an asshole. You're just selfish and stupid. And I just need to find a nice way to let you know that.
Right. It's a very Jesus take the wheel kind of moment, before I go off on you.
For sure. I have a poem called Lessons on Anger. And, being in anger management twice. Once for my son with that long fuse he has. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, if a child has anger, then the parent does too. No, no, really. There's one of those stop lying to yourself moments. And so as we're in the course, I was learning a lot, and I was like, oh yeah, I do. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then a second time around, I was in a domestic violence situation, and I ended up going to jail actually for 48 hours in a snowstorm in 2014.
We'll come back to that in just a second, but go ahead.
Yeah, let me put that out there. That's in the book. It's a poem called Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah, and just being honest about the childhood stuff that causes you to be in these reenactments and being in dead situations that really irritate you. And one of the things that's in the poem that my that last facilitator said, he was like, there's truth speakers out there. You guys speak truth. He said, yeah, so Lazarus was a dead person, had been dead for 3 or 4 days, and Jesus was going to do a miracle. He told them to open a tomb, but he didn't go in and pull Lazarus out. He stood from outside and spoke into the tomb. So basically, like, because of my childhood, I was a rescuer. So like, I'll go in the tomb and sit with the person and try to talk to them and bring them back to life and encourage them and rebuild their life. And basically, I'm putting myself in a dead situation that's really irritating me. Rigor mortis and decay is contagious. And so a lot of times we get triggered or get angry because we're in stuck or dead situations where nobody wants to shift or change. And then we get into these fights, or I get put in jail or whatever. But I was in that dead situation. I should have known, And next time when I see someone, instead of trying to be in a relationship with them to help fix them, which is not my job, speak to them. Share the information, share the wealth. If they don't want to apply it, keep it moving. And that's a lot of times where our anger can stem from. And that's why I tell people, my boundaries are for your safety. If I come into that situation, which I'm not going to, and get a mess with you, we're not going to be happy. So let me stay out here, and I'll tell you and give you instruction. And if you don't follow it, I can just keep moseying on, but you can't say nobody didn't tell you.
Right, yeah. And with that type of experience, it's weird how you start something like that where you go, I'm going to set boundaries, because this is how I feel. And then, yeah, like you just said, later on, you realize it's like, oh, yeah, that's just as much for the people I care about, too. You know, because this has to be healthy, because if I don't set up some kind of parameters, it's going to be the Wild West. And, you know, you don't want an emotional Wild West. That can get ugly fast.
Right. And with my childhood, my upbringing, there was no such thing as healthy or what boundaries are. And that's what I talk about in the book, because I feel like women, even women in church, or single women in church, you know, the single mom, it's like you're supposed to give your last, give your widow's mite, give your all, pour it all out. And it's like, it's a pious thing for you to have nothing left. Look at Mother Teresa. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, it's taken me 5+ years to rebuild and say, no, I do deserve my own space, my own energy tank just for me. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's beyond just like self-care and going and getting your hair and nails done, which the pandemic showed us, because all those salons and stuff were shut down for a while. So then what does self-care look like? Yeah. And that's, you know, reaching out for help to be around the right kind of friends and the right kind of people, and saying no to the wrong kind of, because people, if we're all on a raft a raft and we're floating out in the ocean, in this pandemic, as a single person, I had friends who were trying to jump on the raft because I already had the raft going, or the boat going. Mm-hmm. And then I have friends who were coming along with the bigger boat saying, hey, jump into my boat. But the friends who were saying, jump into my boat, I've got you, I've got some food, provisions here, versus the friends that was like, oh, you got a little piece of a raft, let me jump on because I'm drowning. Now the whole daggone thing is going down, you know? So when I talked about the whole story about going into therapy in the beginning of 2021, one of the things my therapist worked with me on is getting those friends out of my life that were trying to jump on my raft and holding on to and foster relationships with people who were offering provisions and had a boat and a respite for me. And then hopefully, you know, trying to build mutually beneficial relationships in business and personal, so that I wasn't so angry or depressed or frustrated or isolated while we navigate this ocean of this isolation and different things. So many different changes going on in this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's interesting because I don't know, when the pandemic started, I kind of thought that it might be a good reset for a lot of people, but it is one of those things now that in hindsight, it's like, no, this was really bad for a lot of people. That they really, a lot of people, I think, were faced with the idea that they had to kind of, they had to look inside themselves a little bit, because they honestly didn't have anything else to do. And I think so many of these poor people, they did not like what they saw. And I think that you're now starting to sort of see the results of that in our current climate, with so many people who are just, like the political division and whatnot seems a lot more toxic and angry than ever before. I mean, it was pretty bad before, but I feel like that's a pretty good example of, you know, the ugliness that people that didn't have the means or the tools to take care of themselves are now kind of out there in the world. And it's almost like it's like a sort of a tornado of shit, for a lack of a better phrase. You know, it's just kind of splattering everywhere, and they don't know how to fix it. And I feel like mental health at this point is something that really needs to be addressed more than ever, because it's so sad to see so many people in these damaged situations, and so many of them seem hopeless to me.
Yeah, and that's what pushed me to write this book, because 2020 just really said, oh, hell no, like, I got a lot to say. I'm tired of seeing people committing suicide. I'm tired of the political division. I'm tired of religious people making Jesus look bad, nationally, internationally, and just all this judging and this hurt and this anger. And so that's why I shared those poems, like A Lesson on Anger. I have two about grief. Because I've experienced a lot of close grief in my life, like losing mother, father, grandparents, uncle, so on. And then my son moving out, that tight relationship, I had to go and get support, just as he was leaving, because we were fighting because he was a teenager, but he was my best friend. I was his best friend. Mm-hmm. And so just the lessons I've learned on coping with crazy things that have happened in my life, I felt like needed to come out and help others during the pandemic. Because some of the poems I wrote, like when my mom passed in 2008, you would swear I wrote that in 2020. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, we're really, really hurting. And so being able to offer EFT and tapping and life coaching and this poetry, it makes sense. It makes it all worth it. And it's like, if I could stop a person from giving up or staying in a bad situation, and not just, and I'm trying to undo shame, saying, well, there's something wrong with me. No, everything we're experiencing now and how we're responding as a human is human. And I think 2020, 2021, and 2022 is starting to give people permission to be human. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to navigate how to do that in a healthy way. But like you said, I thought people were going to stop and reset and say, well, we need to make humans and human connection more important. And that's not what happened. It was like, we need to make politics and economy more important. And then it further damaged people. Mm-hmm. And then now it's just on this crazy, bleeding, hurtful, angry rat race like we were never on before. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, let's get these tools out there. Let's get the therapy out there. Let's talk about, getting the need for therapy, the need for healing. And I see so many people, and I try to tell Christians and church people this, being in a new age space or energy workspace now, you guys don't have a lock on healing. Mm-hmm. Revivals and tent services and how you pushed to keep church open when people were dying, but as long as it wasn't your family, you were okay with that. Mm-hmm. Is a huge antithesis to the way Jesus lived in the Bible. Right. And I am putting this in this poetry to kind of tell people, hey, that's not me. That's not Jesus. That's not the way he operated or would have operated today. Mm. So forgive them, but don't judge faith based on the way those broken people are handling things. And then it's like, okay, so we have healing. You could be healed through energy work. You could be healed through meditation. You could be healed through Buddhism and etc. Now, Christians, what do you have to offer people? Oh, how you treat them? That would be a start, right?
Yeah.
Love does. He says, you will know them by the love you have one for another. So if I was isolated as a Black female in this pandemic, and you're more worried about, us four and no more, and your YouTubes and your social media and things that don't really matter when I am the church. Mm-hmm. And that was a witness to me. Thank God I know what the Bible says, and I have a relationship with Jesus, and I know that's not how he operates. Mm-hmm. But how many tens of thousands of millions of people have walked away from faith because of your behavior? So get your stuff together. Mm. So some of my poems are like that. There's some that were taken out. I'm going to have to do just the Christian poetry book for that. But it's like, get your shit. Like Medea would say, get your shit together, church. Like, Christians, hello, either take the bumper sticker or the cross off and say you're just whatever, but don't put it, like, get Jesus' name off of that, because he don't roll like that, okay? How you're treating women, how you're treating people that don't think and vote like you is totally not how Jesus would function right now. And how much, so really looks like you're loving money and mammon more than you are Christ. So let's just separate that, make that clear, so that you stop giving him bad publicity, because it pisses me off.
I completely feel you on that one, just because there's been so many times where I've heard these these idiot politicians. It doesn't even matter who it is. It's just, but somebody comes in and they're like, what would Jesus do? And I'm like, well, first off, he wouldn't go to your stupid church. Second,
straight like that. Straight like that.
Yeah, it's like, you got to be kidding. It fascinates me when people will drag God and Christ's name through the mud, but they really think that they're doing something to elevate it. And it's like, you have no idea that you're the one Christ was talking about going through the eye of a camel. I am a needle, sorry.
Yeah. It's like, did you read the book, or you just say you're Christian because your uncle or your cousin or your sister has a church? Because that's what they do in the Bible Belt, to be honest. I'm from up north, and it's just like, there either you is or you ain't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And down here, it's like everybody's a Christian, but you really gotta like navigate and test the fruit and listen. And then when 2020 just pulled the whole curtain off of all of that, and it was like, I thought you were a little racist, but now I know. Now I see it. Okay, and then it's like, that really sucks for you, because the best companies I've ever seen, the best communities I've ever seen are the diverse and integrated ones, where someone's Israeli, someone's Palestinian, someone is black, someone's Panamanian, someone is from Japan, and another person's from India, and they work through their differences and they come together. That's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that too, because it's like when you've got people of just diametrically different points of view who are willing to have a conversation. It's not even, I'm trying to convert you, I'm trying to turn you to my point of view. It's like, literally, I just want to hear your perspective. Would you like to hear mine?
Yes.
And those are the best, honestly, those are the best conversations I've ever had. Those are the ones that stick in my mind the most, and they're the ones that I've found, honestly, the most, for lack of a better phrase, spiritually nutritious in a way. There's so many like that, and it's always driven me crazy. Because I went to, I won't say the place. I went to a private school when I was younger, very fundamentalist, very Baptist, and I recognized by like 8 years old how full of shit they were. Yeah. And it's like, and they still are to this day. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. There's a lot of good people there, so I shouldn't paint with that kind of a brush. But there's a lot of people there that their concept of Jesus Christ is, sort of a white middle-class American guy who happens to love everybody, but thinks that gay people should be turned straight, that women should be in the kitchen. It's all these old, awful ways of thinking, and yet they look at them as pious. And it absolutely makes me pull my hair out. And most of my friends, I would say the majority of my friends and the people I associate with are either agnostic or atheist or just don't care. And and they're the ones that I found to be, the most relatable, because they weren't trying to do anything to change my mind. And I think that they recognized I wasn't trying to change them. And we get along great. And I find our conversations enlightening. I love it. Yeah. But I come from the perspective of somebody who has a strong, honestly, I feel like it's an infallible faith in Christ. But I want to be like Jesus in that respect, in terms of I want to love and appreciate people for who they are, and not try to get some sort of weird salesman tally for God when I go to heaven and say, look how many souls I saved for you, and sorry, that was a rant. I went way too flanty. That was stupid. I shouldn't have gone that far out, but you know what I mean.
For sure. Absolutely. Because people can sense when you have an ulterior motive, know. And 2020 just made me, Tamika, a friend of sinners like never before. Yeah. I was isolated from the church, and that's who I raised my son up in that. I wouldn't be who I am today without that community, but the community that I left was just, and I mean, I have forgiveness for them, because, you reap what you sow. In a lot of those places that are so political right now, and have been since 2020, and their numbers and their churches are drying up. The ones who thought that the YouTube and the Instagram was more important than, looking out for the single women and the widow and the fatherless. They're not doing too well right now. And they're complaining and they're blaming people and saying that people rather be home than and watch church on Zoom. I'm like, wait, you said they're watching church. They could be watching Oprah. They could be watching Netflix, and they are watching church, and you're complaining because they're not in your building. Yeah, you need to reread that book again. Yeah, so I'm in a religious school that I can't wait till it's over in December, but when I'm in the calls with them and Zoom and they're off target and they're coming from their own opinions, I do have a lot to say, and that's kind of where I have to really check my anger, because where were you? The real, true, undefiled religion is to look out for the widow and the fatherless in their distress. Where the hell were you?
Yeah.
Throughout my son's life, when I had to stave off, racist police and keep him from the prison to the school to prison pipeline. Where were you? And I have a poem, called Mr. and Mrs. Pro-Life that talks about those things. Like, where the hell were you? I chose life, and I don't condone, murdering babies just because, I do believe women's right to choose should be protected, especially when they're in a distressing situation. And I do feel like, the inseminator, the sperm donor person should be held accountable. It's kind of like the Scarlet Letter, which I have a poem about that, Despising the Scarlet Letter.
Oh, yeah, I read that, yeah.
Where the women get crucified for getting pregnant, but the impregnator can hide in the shadows as long as he wants to. And, that's something that definitely needs to be addressed in this country. And going back to faith and religion, I can't think of her name, but she's a female theologian, and she said that you can tell a nation's relationship to Christ by how they treat women. And if you look at how Jesus interacted with women, especially the ones that he quote unquote shouldn't be talking to or dealing with, if a nation and people aren't acting that way, or a church isn't, or a religious group isn't acting that way towards women, and the people that they can't make a whole. So, women are a powerful force. 2020 has really shown me that, if ever. But if you're looking down on them and just using them as donkeys and mules, that says a lot about your faith.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When you're not doing things to protect our kids in school, and the teachers are majority women, and they're subject to people just coming in and murdering them when they feel like it, that says a lot about our quote-unquote faith in God we trust. And America really needs to get their stuff together when it comes to that, or just say you're something else but not Christian.
Yeah, well, it's like did you ever see that movie, Head of State? I think it's Chris Rock, where he becomes...
No, but I should.
It's like, if I remember correctly, I think it's the movie where he becomes the first black president. It's like before Obama. What was funny was he was running against this guy, and his opponent basically had a slogan, and the slogan was "God bless America and nowhere else."
See?
And I was like, yeah, that about sums it up.
Yeah. I cringed with the license plates and bumper stickers after 9/11 that said "God bless America," and then there was one that came out after that, "America bless God." Like, yeah, that sounds more like it. Like, we don't try to use them as a Band-Aid now when we've been doing our own thing for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that as a nation, as a brand, if you want to call it that, the hypocrisy that the world sees about us is sad, because I talk to people from all kinds of, different backgrounds and different countries and stuff. And I like their news better because it can tend to be more truthful.
Yeah.
They know more about our American history than we do, which is sad. But just like, again, as a brand, if we're marketing that we're Christian and we're not living that, we really got to get back to that as soon as possible and stop blaming the people that are sitting at home on Zoom or on YouTube. It's like, because the places that the places in general that are loving and meeting people where they're needed and loving one another are growing exponentially right now. So there's no excuse. And he says, by love and kindness will I draw them. So sounds like you're missing one of the two, love or kindness, but you're missing it. You so ain't drawing them, you're attracting them. So come on, team. Come on, we can do it. Let's get it together, man.
We can pull each other together. It's like the door is still open. It has not closed. You still got time,
Yeah, and I mean, that's a podcast I want to start called Cordial Conversations, where, I talk to my friends on air from these different backgrounds and cultures, and we would talk about what we agree about, and then talk about the things we don't agree on without, like you said, trying to convert each other, and see, have those kind of conversations once again in public. Because we used to be able to have discourse like that without all this anger and taking things personal. So we need to get back to that so we can rebuild together.
Yeah. And honestly, one of the things that I recommend to people is, it sounds counterproductive, but I recommend just absolutely disconnecting from all forms of news media right now, especially if you're having mental issues, because that stuff is completely designed for damage. It's not designed for strength and growth. It is designed to damage you and to pretty much keep you eating the popcorn in front of the television.
Polarizing.
Yeah. And because I disconnected years ago, and I've been mentally in a much healthier place because of it. I still, check out the news and I find out just things that are going on. But my view of it is, I'm so skeptical of how it's being sent to me and presented to me that I barely touch on it. I look at it going, okay, so-and-so died. That's all I need to know. Beyond that is all bullshit and fluff, and I don't need to know anything else. And I don't know. It worked for me. I'm sure it'll work for others. But I think if people really tried to focus on removing not necessarily negativity, but just any kind of poisonous type of environment from your life, it will help you to become a stronger and better person. And that's different for all kinds of people, which is what I feel like you with doing your emotional freedom techniques is really what you're trying to lead people to as well.
Yeah, because it's like I like to problem solve personally for myself, and I like to be in groups. Like I have the female mastermind group where we're helping each other solve our business problems and in peripheral things that affect us in our businesses. But it's with people who want to solve the problem, not, Tamika, can you fix this for me? Or David, can you fix this for me? And so EFT is a way of fixing it, fixing the hurt and and helping to heal and to bring comfort and support. Because every human is worthy of love and belonging, but they have to believe that personally for themselves. And, if you're watching the news and it's pulling you apart and pulling you multiple different places, you feel like you're not enough. You feel like things will never get better. It's very depressing. I really feel like, one of my elderly neighbors, that's all he ever did was watch the news. And I told him, I was like, that's going to kill you, and he did pass on, to be honest. It's like, and it's sad because what the news was 50 years ago is not what it is now. And like I said, if you go abroad and watch a report on the news, I was in Jamaica when the New York blackout happened in 2003. I was at, with friends and family. I wasn't at a resort. And the news was reported so much differently than what was being reported in the States, and it's just, I told a good friend that writes for a paper, I said, I don't even read your paper because there's usually a black or brown person on the front who's done something horrendous, and then we get to the rest of the news. I said, at least the New York Times, they started every Sunday, they put something positive on the cover. You know, I don't know if they still do that. I say, but there's so many good things that are going on around us. That's what I want to focus on.
Oh yeah, amen. I completely agree, because when you focus on the good things and the happier things, it does change your mind to kind of point yourself in that direction, and I think the long-term effects of that are just really amazing.
Yeah, you what you focus on is what you'll attract into your life, and that's why I try to help people reshift their story and how they focus or see things, so that and I intentionally do that for myself, so that we can continue to attract the good things, because there's an abundance of great things and great people around us and going on in our communities and in the world. And if we can energetically connect to that and draw that in, everyone will be more fulfilled and healed and doing well. Because we don't have to be perfectly healed and whole in order to enjoy mutually beneficial relationships, friendships, intimacy, and interaction with our world. Those healthy and forming and developing relationships with people who are growing and developing themselves, we continuously grow and develop together, and we make ourselves and the world a better place. And that's the beauty that I'm seeing from the tragedies and the struggles that I've been through and through 2020 to now. Just some really amazing, beautiful people. Like I said about Winston, when I was on the news, when I had Honeybee grocery delivery, and I was being interviewed about how the pandemic has affected my business, and I was rewarded a grant through the Restart Winston-Salem program, and I said, it's unfortunate that we are in a pandemic, but out of all the cities in the U.S. I've lived in, I'm so happy I'm in Winston-Salem, because it's a beautiful place, and the people have come together to support one another during this pandemic, and it's just amazing. It really filled my soul.
So that's going to do it for this episode of the Piedmont Triad Podcast. I'd like to thank Tamika for taking a few minutes to talk to us. Make sure you go to her website, Tamika Wells, TamikaWells.com, to find connections to all of her businesses, where you can also pick up her book of poetry. And you can also book her for a session if you find that you need any kind of business or life coaching advice. As always, a big thanks to Matt Smith and the Cowboy Spankers for letting us use their song Not Tonight as our theme music, and a big thanks as well to my friend and artist Brian Falk for all of our logo artwork. Big thanks to you again for listening. Make sure to go and subscribe to the Piedmont Triad Podcast and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever the hell you listen to podcasts. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at Piedmont Podcast, Facebook at Piedmont Triad Podcast. Also, be sure to go to heavy-vinyl.com, our online rock and heavy metal vinyl website, where you can find and grab new metal and rock vinyl releases, as well as all of our Piedmont Triad podcast episodes, as well as our sister podcast, Rock God Podcast. Until next time, Triad.
Maybe I should keep on moving. You're like the devil when the sun goes down. Stay away from me. Well, I'm too far gone. There ain't nothing here to see, babe. So you best just move along.